the characteristics of unsuccessful projects. What are the things that I sit there and I literally lose sleep about this stuff at night when I think about our projects that have some of these characteristics? To me, the number one problem is, even after we do a lot of training, even after we put a lot of documentation, a lot of processes in place, a lot of mentoring structures, all that type of stuff, the team just can't become productive. So I see we still have connectivity problems online. I see my bit rate has gone up again. So hopefully that was the end of that. Anyway, so teams that just cannot become productive. I see a lot of teams where you have, say, 7, 8 people on a team. You have the leader of the team. The leader of the team works reasonably productive, although not that great. You have another 2 people that can kind of follow along with that. And then you have the rest of the team, and they just cannot function. And nobody can figure out why. The leaders just feel they're stupid. The rest of the team feels the project is set up horribly. And no matter how much training you do, you just cannot become productive. This is probably the number one characteristic of projects that we see that are unsuccessful, where people call us in, customers call us in to do project rescue. This is the number one characteristic I see. And I would not be surprised if a good percentage of the people that are online watching this event now say, yep, that's kind of the setup that we have. So this productivity issue is something you need to solve. It's not gonna get better. If you have this type of issue in your project, you need to take a step back and need to take a look at everything you're doing. Are you really building value, business value, features that are being pushed out and available to users? Or are you just catering towards this project setup where you built this high architecture with all these best practices, but maybe don't even need them for this project, right? So bringing sanity back to a project. I see a lot of projects where even senior developers struggle. This whole setup that I just told you with 8 people, 5 of which can function, those 5 people in many cases are still very senior developers. It's a very, very common scenario. Things that should be common, things that should be used a lot, are not easy. That's a horrible characteristic, right? You're setting up a project and everything you do is just hard. You're adding another microservice operation, another method essentially, that potentially has relatively simple data access or some very simple business logic. And building that is not hard. Right? It may be a 20-line operation that takes you literally 5 minutes to build, but putting it all into place takes 3 hours because the whole pipeline, the whole infrastructure is just so complex. And then you try to run it and you have no good way to run it, and you trigger certain things, but the infrastructure is such that everything can go wrong in the middle and you don't really know why, and then it never comes out the other end and your code is never triggered, and you're like, well, it took me 5 minutes to write this, but now a day has gone by and I'm still not sure it works. That is horrible, right? You need to make sure that very common things you do a lot, those things need to be easy, and doing the right thing needs to be easy. I've also seen this a lot, where typically here's what happens. You do a project and it went reasonably well, but it was kind of a death march and you got it done, but you're like, next time we do it all better. And then you look at that and you put all this stuff in place because one day that will be a huge benefit. We're putting all this stuff in place, so if you ever have to go to a different database, it will be easy. If you ever have to add this, it will be easy. If you ever have to scale it, we're already there. We already made the stuff that scales really well, even though we don't need it yet. This nebulous future benefit I have never seen come to fruition in 30 years of software development. Maybe you are the exception. I'd love to hear about it, where you struggled through this unproductive project, but 3 years later, everything worked like a charm and you got all this benefit and you harvested all that investment many times over. That's the idea of this, right? I've just never seen it because 3 years down the road, things are very different. And then this whole issue, I see this a lot, where the project in theory should be fantastic. because you've put everything in place that anyone ever told you is best practices. You've watched every State.net, you've been reading the Microsoft blogs, you've watched conferences, listened to .NET Rocks, all those things, and you put all those things in place, and theoretically the project should be great, and you're doing all kinds of testing and automated builds, and all the tests run beautifully. It's just you never have anything to show for it, right? The project as a whole is not coming together. It's very slow in the big picture. You're not achieving your milestones. You're not putting out actual features. The business stakeholders in the project never get to see as much as they need to be. That's not a good project. The purpose of project is not to build high architecture and have 100% test coverage. The idea at the end of the day is to build a system that does something. And people forget about that, right? So that's something I see a lot when I go and look at things.